This story was shared to us by a listener. I want to thank him for sharing his story. My situation is unique because I found out about my wife cheating. After she passed away, my wife grew up with both parents. They went to church every Sunday. Since she was born, we've been married for 13 years and dating. Since we were 18 years old, we have 3 kids and a house. The kids were 8, 11, and 13. When she passed away in 2020, we made around the same amount for years. She made between $3,600 to $4,000 a month as an RN. I made between $3,000 to $5,000 a month as a wholesale supplier. I saw several signs and blatantly ignored them. Here are some of the signs I ignored. Her phone was on the floor. I went to pick it up and put it on the charger. She jumped out of her sleep and asked me what I'm doing with her phone. I thought to myself, the only reason she would react in such a way, if she's cheating. Another sign, we were talking in the front room, she showed me a video clip of a guy in New York who does sexual massages. I grabbed the phone from her so I can view it myself. She started going crazy and fighting me over it. I eventually gave it back to her, but the biggest sign I ignored, she said she was going to a club one night. She didn't come home until 4:30 in the morning. We had a big argument about coming home. So late, the only reason I didn't jump to conclusions, she was cheating. In the first year of our marriage, I stayed out until 5 in the morning with my friend. We went to the club, then chilled outside talking. I wasn't with the girl, nor was I cheating. My phone ends up dying. So, she couldn't get in contact with me. When I finally came home, she didn't accuse me of cheating and said she was concerned. She called the cops to report me missing, but she had to wait 24 hours. The last sign before she passed away, maybe 4 to 6 days prior, I asked her if I could use her phone to post clothes on Facebook for advertising. She was hesitant, then started going over her phone. I said to myself, that's something I would do if I were cheating. I reassured her, I wouldn't go through her phone because I didn't want to know if she was cheating. Besides, I trust her. She gave me her phone and I went into the room. After 10 minutes of using her phone and posting on Instagram and Facebook, I decided to go in her direct message on Instagram. I went to a conversation she had with her best friend. I said to myself, if she's cheating, her best friend would know. I read a little bit of the conversation. It wasn't anything there. I went to the text messages and noticed text messages by a trainer. I saw a little bit of the conversation, then closed out because I felt bad about going through her phone. After I told her I wouldn't, that's when she walked to the room to see if I was using her phone. I told her I was almost done, but I found it odd again. I said to myself, she's showing signs of a cheater. We had a conversation months prior to her passing about cheating. I asked her if I cheated on her, what would she do? Her reply, I don't know, because I have never dealt with you cheating before. I found it odd because we started dating at 18. We've always agreed the relationship is over. If one of us cheats, I told her, I'd rather you divorce me because I don't want to know. I don't know how I would react. I read stories from men murdering their family or abusing their spouse and going to jail. I have listened to songs about a guy committing suicide after discovering his wife cheating. Another song about a guy dying in a car crash after going through his girl's phone. I didn't want to be in that predicament. So, I convinced myself not wanting to know is the best option. All the signs I ignored were within the last year of her passing. She passed away in September of 2020. When I got home to tell the kids, we started crying and the kids were screaming. It's the most gut-wrenching experience in my life. It still haunts me till this day. When I think about it, I got her phone from my youngest son and asked if they knew the password. The youngest one told me the code. I told myself I would keep my word by not going through her phone, even in death. I planned on deleting the text messages when I got time to do it. I announced her passing on Facebook. I plan to keep her memory alive by posting pictures every day. I decided to bury her next to my mother, where we agreed to be buried after my mother passing. About 5 days after she passed, a guy sends her a video message from the Caribbean islands where she went on vacation. I decided to respond to him as her to find out if anything went on between them. By the conversation, they sent video messages back and forth. How are you doing conversations? I decided to call her friend and ask her about it because they went on vacation together. My wife's girlfriend, Nancy, played it off and said they took his information because they wanted a travel guide. The next time they went, she told me, "You know, your wife loved you." The day after the funeral, I wanted to post a video of her instead of a picture. I went through the trash area of her phone. As I'm scrolling, I noticed a naked picture of a man. I thought to myself, if you go down the rabbit hole, it's no turning back, but I couldn't turn a blind eye now. That's when I decided to go through her phone. When I went to her Facebook Messenger, I didn't see anything. Just conversations with her friends. I went through her text messages. It was a treasure trove of information. I read the whole conversation with the personal trainer. As I'm going back in the conversation, I found sexting, nudes and texts saying, "I can't talk right now because he's next to me." As I'm reading everything, I became furious and started having a nervous breakdown. I'm thinking to myself, I wish she was here so I could confront her. I felt like she got away without talking to me. Now I'm brainstorming about everything. I see the personal trainer's address. I decided to Google it because it seemed familiar, and it was. I remember going to his apartment to pick up her gym clothes months prior to their sexual encounter. I felt disrespected and violated. I decided to call her best friends because I wanted answers. I had to piece the story together as much as possible. I knew they wouldn't give me any information. So, I had to trick them by threatening to expose their infidelity on social media. I called her best friend, Nancy, again, because she dealt with her every day. She didn't want to tell me anything, but she felt compelled since she didn't want my wife's information exposed. She told me after the club one night, my wife went to a hotel and almost had sex with a guy, but he couldn't get aroused. I guess she thought that wouldn't piss me off. The friend didn't know about the guy I found in her phone. The guy she told me about was different. The friend explained when I went to the club with my wife, they would see each other and wouldn't say anything. Now I'm steaming in my head because I'm in the same club with the guy sleeping with my wife. I asked Nancy why she didn't divorce me. If she was going to cheat, she said, because she felt like you were a good father. After I heard that I felt used and manipulated for her to stay with me because she didn't want to co-parent and handle financial obligations by herself was an insult. Especially when she's making $8,000 a month as an APRN. She got her master's in November 2019 and started working a new job in January 2020, 9 months before she passed away. I decided to call her friends to find out what went on behind my back. I barely got any information after threatening to expose her. One person told me she used to flirt with a coworker. That's it. As the days went on, after discovering everything, I read the text messages with all our friends. Nancy told my wife about her cousin being interested in her. My wife told her to give him her number. Now I'm furious as hell. I decided to call her again to speak about the situation. I'm screaming and yelling obscenities. She's gasping and sighing on the phone. I told Nancy she will never see the kids again. Now she's hurt and making excuses for her involvement by saying she got nothing to do with it. I told her, "You're the one who told my wife your cousin was interested and exchanged numbers." A few days later, I decided to get in contact with Nancy's boyfriend and tell him about Nancy going to hotels with other men. All the information in my wife's phone, I gave him one of the guy's phone numbers so he could get in contact with him. I told him not to react right away, just get access to her phone and go through it because she switched the names around. He calls me back 2 weeks later and tells me about the aftermath. He said he waited 10 days to confront her. He went through a Facebook Messenger since he had access to it, but he didn't see much, only little signs. When he went to confront her at the hiking trail, he grabbed the phone from her and she panicked. Then said, she's going to call the cops. So, he decided to break the phone since he's the one paying for it. As I'm going through my wife's phone some more, I see conversations with multiple men. I see one conversation that alarmed me with her friend, Amy. It implied the guy she almost had sex with was interested in a threesome, which seemed to intrigue my wife. I remember a conversation we had around the time. My wife asked me if I would be interested in a threesome. I told her no, because it goes against my religious beliefs. Even though I would be interested, I think she was using me as a moral gauge. I saw Cash App payments from the guy to her after she went out to eat with him. Plus, I remember the day because she said she would bring some food home from the restaurant, but she changed her mind because the food wasn't good. I saw conversations with other friends saying I was jealous of her. I never specified in detail why I'm jealous of her. I'm left to assume it's over me trying to prevent her from doing something that costs her her life. She's telling associates I'm mean and nasty to her because countless arguments over finances and cleaning. She wouldn't clean up the house and spent most of her money on vacations, shopping and partying. While my money was tied up paying bills, I'm not going to lie. I was verbally abusive to her, but I felt justified in my actions because I wanted more out of life than living check to check and living in a nasty house. It was countless insults behind my back by her, to my sisters and boss. After she died and I had to take care of all the bills, I found out she was 2 months behind on the car insurance. The washer and dryer were not paid off after I gave her half of the money to take care of it. A month later, I told her the washing machine wasn't working. Her reply, it was stopped working after we paid it off. She took 15 days to pay the mortgage certain amounts after I gave her half the money to pay it before the grace period. To make matters worse, I found out she was smoking marijuana. That startled me because since teenagers, we agreed to never smoke marijuana. If I knew she was smoking, I would have told her to stop or I'll leave. I decided to tell 2 of my kids about their mother's infidelity and the not-so-kind words she expresses about her kids to Nancy's cousin. The oldest one got extremely mad and told me to remove all her pictures from the wall. The 11-year-old seemed indifferent about it. His main concern was beating up the guys she slept with. I had to explain to him why it's inappropriate when she slept with them willingly. I never told the youngest one what his mother did. I felt like he wouldn't understand. Sometimes he feels left out because his other brothers know, plus he was confused with the removal of her pictures. He said, it felt like I didn't love his mother. Now I'm wrestling with the idea of moving her casket. I don't want her next to my mother. I don't want to be buried next to her. I decided to research if she could be transferred to her father's cemetery and the cost. When I decided to tell her brother about my decision, he objected to it, asking why I never had a full conversation with him or the mother over their daughter's infidelity. It felt awkward telling them since their perception of her was a righteous woman. I felt like it would be a tough pill to swallow. Her mother heard about her daughter cheating indirectly. Her niece told her I found information on her phone. I told her brother about her indiscretions in a roundabout way, but the phone hung up without me knowing. I was talking on the phone to nobody for 10 to 15 minutes. I took it as a sign. He wasn't meant to know the details. When I told my sisters about moving her, they told me not to make any rash decisions and give it a year. My wife's family doesn't want her casket moved. I decided to leave her next to my mother, but I'm not getting her a headstone, which some of the family members are upset about. I won't allow anybody else to get her one. If they decide to do it without my consent, I'll have it removed. I haven't been able to visit my mother since September the 26th, 2020. I used to visit her several times within a week. I stopped going after my wife was buried next to her. I feel like if I go see my mother, I'll be paying my respects to her as well. 3 weeks after my wife died, I met a girl and went out on a date with her and we hit it off. She ends up getting pregnant 2 months later, but the timing was horrible. Especially dealing with my kids and public perception. 2 months later, after my girlfriend announced her pregnancy, Nancy decided to make a long post on Facebook using a fake page, disparaging me by saying my wife took care of the finances and kids. She stated I was in the house with the kids, but I didn't take care of them. Also, she said I wasn't capable of putting half the money down on a house. Plus hinted at me cheating on my wife because it's no way my new girlfriend popped up pregnant 2 months after my wife died. One of my sisters felt the same way and asked questions in a roundabout way to debunk their theory. My daughter was born in July 2021. So, my girlfriend had to get pregnant in October or November. She lived in California before coming back to Connecticut to help her mother. She came back in June 2020, 2 months before my wife passed away. Besides, my wife and girlfriend are friends with my female boss I work for at a car wash. So, it's no way possible for me to get away with cheating. I would be paranoid to pull it off. Plus the most important part, I don't want to go to my kids and tell them the reason Daddy had to leave the house because I cheated. My girlfriend planned to go back to California with her mother in a few months. She only came back to help her mother sell the condo. After getting pregnant, she stayed with me to give birth to my daughter. I'm not a big believer in karma, but somehow I feel like the string of events was timed. My wife became an RN in 2007 and started making $3,600 a month. She went back to school in 2014 to get her master's. She received her master's in late 2019. She started her new job as an APRN in January of 2020, making $8,000 a month. For the 13 years we were married, I didn't know about her life insurance policy. I knew she had one, but I didn't know the details. After she passed, I looked into everything. Her job from 2014 to 2019, she had an insurance policy for both of us for $40,000 and less for the kids. When she started her new job in 2020, she only had life insurance policy on herself for 6 figures. It shocked me. She didn't have one for the kids and took the minimum policy through her job. I'm assuming she wanted to keep as much money for herself in her paycheck. I remember having an argument with her about not having life insurance to bury me. I told her I'm not dying anytime soon. And if I do, just wrap me up and bury me without a casket. So it's not costly. At the time I was looking at life insurance with my credit union, but I was procrastinating. For years, I prevented my wife from having surgery done. When my mother died in December of 2019, I was depressed and devastated. I decided she can get surgery work done because I didn't want to control her life, but I told her I prefer her not to do it. If she does it, she's on her own. I am not going to the appointments. I don't want to know anything because I don't approve of the surgery. I was trying to deter her from doing it on her own will. She decides to do it anyway and passed away 9 days after the surgery. I feel like she had the surgery done to build up her self-esteem when she's out cheating. Recently, I found more information on my wife's phone. It's hundreds of videos of her talking to her friends. The videos are 10 to 15 minutes long, but I found a video of her talking about being in love with a third guy. She insinuated they had sex, but I don't have anything concrete because I didn't watch all the videos. Most of the conversation with the friends are about work. I don't want to invest a large amount of time watching videos all day. If her family gets upset over the headstone, I'll probably watch all the videos to cement why she can't get one. In the end, I think about it every day and get upset, especially not being able to confront her. My girlfriend says I should be happy at the end of the day. I got the house, life insurance, and the kids. After thinking about it, she's right. If my wife was alive and I found out, my life would have been upside down. I would have to stay with one of my sisters and start over. I didn't know anything about hiring a private investigator or getting evidence to prove infidelity for divorce until listening to stories on Reddit. I probably wouldn't have been able to force the sale of the house since the house is solely in her name. My credit was bad at the time and I didn't want to ruin our chances, but I put half the payment down and paid half the mortgage every month. I blindly trusted her because she went to church all her life. She held many titles in church. I thought she was incapable of cheating. If she did cheat, she probably slept with one guy. But I don't know how many men she slept with, and I'm left to conclude. It could have been over 10 guys because my girlfriend found Facebook conversations on paper from 2011, 2013, and 2016 with her flirting. She was supposed to meet up with one guy, but one of the kids got sick. So, in the end, I got the house, 6 figures, the kids, and a girlfriend who will clean up and do what I want. My fiancé, Adam, has 4 kids from his former partners, twin daughters, preschoolers, another daughter, pre-tween, and a son, preschooler. I have a daughter, kindergartner. He would treat all the kids the same till the wedding planning came. He picked his son as the ring bearer and his 3 daughters as flower girls, but had no role for my daughter. I asked if we could add her to be a flower girl just like her stepsisters, but he refused without explaining. He just kept it short, saying no. My daughter heard the girls talking about it and said she wanted to be the flower girl as well, and I brought it up with Adam again. He told me 3 was enough to be flower girls and that there was no spot left for my daughter. I said we could make them 4 and add my daughter. Why not? He said it wouldn't work for some reason. I insisted, and he suddenly snapped and told me it was not a huge deal for me to be so worked up like this. I said my daughter wishes to be among the flower girls and wear and do what they do, and his daughters aren't somehow superior to mine. He gave me a nasty stare and said, "Ha, so this is what it's all about," then told me I was being ridiculous and quite toxic with this my child your child mentality. He insisted that he treats all the kids the same and that he can't believe I'd questioned that over some nonsensical issue as the flower girl. We had a full-blown argument, and he said I was acting immaturely by insisting on making this a big deal and choosing it as a hill to die on. Am I the idiot for choosing this hill to die on, or am I being unreasonable? For those who are confused about the age of his twin daughters and son, he got both of his exes pregnant at the same time, take or give a few months. He divorced his first ex, then went on to marry the second ex, then later divorced her. Let me get this straight. In the span of 4 to 5 years, this man has gotten his first wife pregnant, cheated on his first wife, possibly while she was pregnant, got the mistress pregnant, divorced the first wife, married the mistress, divorced the mistress, dated and proposed to you successfully? Busy guy. OP, prepare to be cheated on. He has a pattern. Now he's being mean to your daughter for an unspecified reason. Not the idiot. Die on this hill and reevaluate if he's worth marrying. Seriously, just that small bit of history she shared about him would make me run and is a giant red flag. She definitely shouldn't marry this man. He got 2 women pregnant simultaneously, and this is the dude you want to marry? Marry some self-esteem and save your daughter the therapy. Grab your daughter and run. Do not marry this man. If this is how he treats your daughter now, how will he treat her after the wedding? There are 4 little girls. If 4 is too many, then there should only be 2, one of his and one of yours. Why should his 3 get to be a part of the wedding, but your only daughter is not? Why do you not have any say in your wedding? Will you have any say in any decisions after the wedding? Yeah, he's showing you who he is, and your daughter will always come second to his kids. And in what world does he get to make all the wedding decisions anyway? Please, for your and your daughter's sake, break this off. How is this not enough for you to blow off the engagement? What would you say if your daughter, as an adult, brought someone like him home as a partner? Hey mom, this is Greg. He got someone pregnant while he was with his pregnant wife. Then he divorced his wife, married his mistress, then divorced her too. But I want to marry him. Geez, it makes you wonder why his other baby mamas left. This is an absolute example of gaslighting, and he does it knowingly and deliberately. You haven't said how long you two have been together, but given his previous relationships and timelines, it can't be more than a couple of years. The honeymoon phase of your relationship can't be far from over. And now he's showing you who he truly is. He hasn't learned anything from his 2 failed marriages, and doesn't value you or your child. Don't make the biggest mistake of your life. Walk away now. Recently, I, female 26, have won quite a lot of money in the lottery. It's not the main prize, it was one of the top 3 though, but it's a life-changing amount in my country. I grew up poor, very poor, and while I worked my way up, my closest family still struggles. I help, but I can't fix everything. Well, I couldn't before. My winnings were recently deposited into my bank account, completely separate from my normal one. I'm not touching that money until I have my meeting with the financial advisors that I hired. I plan to use a small amount of money to enjoy and use part to improve my family's life, e.g. buy them flats that they can later on afford to upkeep, but in a safer place and of better quality. Then invest the vast majority in a different venture to ensure revenue for years to come, so that I can live comfortably and help my family. The only people that know are my closest family and my boyfriend, Andy, 30. We've been together for 7 months, but we don't live together. Andy has different plans. He came up with a list of items he needs, and has been pressuring me to get them before I even speak to my advisors. Basically, he wants a new car, stereotypically. He wants something like a Tesla, which he doesn't need. He wants us to move in together, and for me to buy a house with a pool. He's now started talking about kids, blah blah, even though he knows that I'm child-free. I've been refusing every single request, telling him that necessities come first, and that money should be under lock and key until I speak with my financial advisors. Naturally, he's not very happy. He's been calling me a Scrooge, telling me I don't love him anymore, calling me a cheapskate. Worst of all, he now told every one of our friends about this, and they've started pressuring me as well, asking me to fund nights out, etc., and they've been very cruel when I refuse, idiot being almost a compliment. I'm devastated. Am I really an idiot in this situation? Am I the idiot for not wanting to spend frivolously? Not the idiot. Unfortunately, your boyfriend now sees you as an ATM, not a girlfriend. It's not you. It's a sudden influx of money that shows people's true colors. He and your friends will not leave you alone. They will suck you dry of the money and then dump you. I would dump him and block them, then move ASAP. You need new friends. Oh, and you've only been together 7 months? Just 7 months, and he just makes demands? Daddy also spread the news of your win. He behaves as if it's his money. Well, I bet he thinks it is his money. It would be best if you ended it. He just sees the money, and he doesn't care about you anymore. Keep the money safe and unload the boyfriend. He'll only get worse. Han, you do not deserve this. He's cunning and selfish. When you would not comply, he told your friends something you didn't want. His tactics will increase and expand if you don't set a boundary or cut him off. You deserve someone who respects your wishes and is a supportive partner. Congrats. Winnings usually amplify the worst in people's character. Stay true to yourself or you'll regret it. Just my 2-cent advice. Since you sound like a generous person, if I was in your shoes, I'd start figuring out who's sincerely asking for help, and who's asking for what they want and will always want more. I also wouldn't buy my family houses, because they might want more and more, and you'll only get scorned from them for not doing more, even if you give in to them until you're bankrupt. Good luck, because life is gonna change. I, 29 male, had a kid, my daughter, with my ex-wife, 32, 10 years ago. And there's no real way to sugarcoat this. But as soon as she was born, I left, and I never ended up seeing her in the hospital as a baby. I was never really present in her life at any point, but I ended up getting a divorce 11 months later, with her getting full custody, of course. I married young, was really stupid, and thought I'd end up being a good dad, despite having no skills. But I got scared that I'd turn out like my dad and chickened out. Not really an excuse, but an explanation, I guess. I paid child support for the first 3 years, but stopped afterward. I've been speaking with the girl's mother about reconnecting with her, but she thinks I should stay out of their lives. But I think making amends is always possible, so I'm not sure. I want to make things right, but I will respect their decision. I've seen her a few times, but her mother's always introduced me as a friend. She says she will tell him when she's ready. I've been dating a girl, 28, for about 10 months, and I really like her. I think I could see a life for us. And I know that sounds weird, but she's also said the same. I also spoke to my daughter's mother about meeting this girl, but she says absolutely not, and that's a bad idea. But if I want to reintroduce her into my life, isn't it fair that she gets to see my life too? Am I the idiot for this? Her mother says it's a terrible idea, so it's making me think that I am, but I just genuinely cannot see why. Obviously, I care for this girl, and I will care for her life too, but a relationship has to be two-sided. I don't think it's out of the question to show her my life too. You are the idiot. You're not her father. You are a stranger to your daughter. You paid support for 3 years, which means for 7 years, the mother's been alone even financially. You don't get to walk back in because you have a girlfriend you think you might be with forever. This child isn't a relationship device. She's a human whose life and feelings matter more than you and your selfish desire to make amends. Try therapy to deal with your daddy issues before marriage and having children with this new woman. Why did you stop paying child support? Why haven't you started paying again? Sounds like OP owes 7 years worth of child support before he gets any say. After that, it's still going to be a long prove it that he's serious about being in his kid's life. The obvious conclusion is that his only motivation here is to con this new girl into thinking he's a halfway decent person, or at least not someone who will do to her and her potential child what he did to his ex and hers. The fact that he's clearly only interested in the child as a human prop to deceive his girlfriend and doesn't register the emotional harm that would do to the child pretty solidly indicates that he would likely do it again. Precisely, He knows she'll eventually find out he has a kid and knows that once she realizes that he ran out on the woman and child as soon as the birth happened and even stopped making payments 3 years in, she'll know what a selfish jerk he is. Your daughter isn't some trophy to show off. I 30 female have a set of triplets. Their father's supposed to get them every other weekend, but he rarely gets them. Maybe once every few months if he has a girlfriend he's trying to impress. So, my daughters are mixed. I'm very particular about how they look most of the time. If we go out in public, I make sure they look good, I make sure their hair is done, and they have very nice dresses. 99% of the time if someone sees my girls, they look magazine-worthy. However, they are toddlers and you just don't put on a pretty dress on them when they go to the park to play. I had taken them to get their pictures made for Christmas and after we went to the park because they deserved a reward for being so good. So, I changed them into some really warm rompers and coats. They also had hats and gloves. They weren't nasty or anything, but playing in dresses in the winter is just a no. They needed warm play clothes. Max called and asked what we were doing and I told him we were headed to the park. He wanted to see the girls so I told him to meet us at the park. I assumed he would be alone and I kind of assumed he wouldn't show up at all because it was very out of character for him. He showed up with a woman and a child. He immediately got angry with me because the girls weren't wearing pretty clothes. They were wearing winter play clothes. He also complained that one of the girls' hair looked a little messy. She's a toddler and messes with her hair, so of course it's messy. Also, she was wearing a winter hat, so you could barely see her hair anyway. I told him no, I wasn't going to put them back in their dresses and I wasn't going to keep fixing her hair just for her to take it down again. It's stressful for her and me. She was happily playing and didn't care at all. Anyway, he was very angry and I'm not sure if I was being the idiot or not. The woman he came with apologized to me for his behavior and I told her not to worry about it. Added to add, he's always been particular about outward appearances. He's always clean-shaven and meticulous about his hair and clothing. Nothing can be even slightly dirty or messy. So, I wasn't that surprised he immediately was upset about their appearances. Not the idiot. He doesn't help you with the triplets, but then shows up out of the blue just to criticize your parenting. I'd remind him that they have 2 parents and he's welcome to be involved with dressing them and doing their hair anytime he likes. I hope this idiot is paying child support. He villainizes you for taking care of your child. Yes, of course it's a good idea to risk my children getting hypothermia to impress a man who doesn't care about them. Whoever that man is, he's a wretch and a leech. He only wishes to impress based on living breathing beings with feelings that care and cherish. He uses living children to show and tell for his new flame every other week, which is gross. But ultimately, he fails when he can't keep up the perfect parent facade in front of his newest prey, a mother who sees right through it. And he was being so rude that a woman he brought along, possibly his girlfriend, who you'd never met before, felt compelled to apologize to you, his ex, for his behavior. Wow. How many more barrels can he scrape the bottom of? Then tell him he can dress them how he likes the next time he bothers to pick them up for his appointed weekend. My wife lost her mother to cancer 2 years ago. It was horrible and it took a toll on everyone, but obviously my wife more than anything. They were very close, pretty much best friends. We knew it was coming and the illness took over our lives, which is to be expected. I also knew my wife would struggle when she finally did pass, so I tried to convince her to go to therapy, but she refused. We have 2 older children, a young teen and a young child, and this year she gave birth to our youngest. This is the only grandchild my mother-in-law never got to meet. The whole pregnancy was very bittersweet and my wife kept saying, I wish mom was here. I wish mom could meet him, etc. Again, to be expected. But the issue has come up that even before our son was born, every event went back to her mom. At first I understood, but it's become like we have this cloud hanging over us, preventing us from fully enjoying happy moments. I've tried talking to my wife about it gently, but she gets super defensive and refuses to even talk about therapy. Our oldest became a teen over the weekend. She had spoken to her mom privately and said she'd like for there to be no talk of her grandmother. She wanted a happy celebration and to not get sad that her grandmother wasn't there. My wife agreed. We went out to dinner and everything was fine. Towards the end, we had cake. My wife said, "It's just so sad that Grandma can't be here. She'd be so proud of who eldest has turned out to be. I wish she could be here." Our eldest got mad. She blew out her candles, but didn't speak for the rest of the dinner. When we got home, I spoke to my wife privately and said what she did wasn't fair. I said she could have excused herself if she was that emotional, but she honestly didn't seem to be. I told her that this couldn't continue to happen. She told me that wasn't fair. I said what isn't fair is this rain cloud she forces over us. She's been off ever since and won't really talk to me or our eldest. She's saying that we are insensitive. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Your wife needs grief counseling. She's the idiot. Your child just had her entrance into being a teenager made about death by her mother. It's not about her grandma. It's not about your wife. It's about your kid, and she was denied that. So, your wife is being insensitive, not you or your child. Yeah, the wife's grief is very understandable, but it seems like she's tainting the memory of grandma for her daughter and for the rest of the family. It's enough of a constant situation that your daughter, who's only a young teen, literally asked her in advance not to do this one time for her own birthday celebration, and your wife wouldn't do it. It's obviously a problem. And just to point out, even if she refuses to get therapy, that doesn't mean the rest of you can't. You may have to learn coping strategies or ways to redirect. I don't get this take. Why should the rest of the family, who by all accounts seem to be doing fine, be the ones who have to put all the effort in to tiptoe around mom, who refuses to get help for her parent issues? It's been 2 years. 2 years of OP trying to tell her to get help, and of the kids hearing about their dead grandma on every special occasion. The person who needs help is the person creating the problem. Why should they have to figure out how to redirect their mom's behavior? Their kids, not trained. The wife, who seemed devoted and loving, was hiding a secret about her lover that ruined their world. She cheated on her husband, fulfilling her lover's every wish. But what happens when the deception is exposed and she is left alone, lost in her own lying games? This is a story of betrayal and consequences. James fell in love with his future wife as soon as he got a new job. He was 25 and Emily was 20. She was working part-time while studying at university. The girl didn't take her colleague seriously. For a long time she refused him even an ordinary date. But later she gave up and did not regret it. James turned out to be a wonderful man with whom there was something to talk about. In addition, he was handsome and attracted the attention of the female colleagues. A year later, Emily found out she was pregnant and later they had a beautiful baby girl whom her father adored. Neither of them noticed how 18 years flew by. Ever since Emily was a little girl they had a friend, Vika, who had been friends since kindergarten. And they managed to carry this friendship through the years into adulthood. Vika had been divorced for a long time. She was raising her son Callie on her own. He had just recently returned from the army and decided to make up for lost time by attending university. James was used to his wife going out with a friend several times a week. Then they went to the gym together. Then to the movies. Then just sat at home and drank. When their relationship just started, still young James did not understand why his beloved did not devote all her free time to him. He resented Emily, quietly hated Vika. But over the years he got used to their relationship. Emily joked with her husband, saying that he was just jealous that he had never had such friends and never would. James understood that, to some extent, this was true. Their daughter had left to study in another city right after high school. She had always dreamed of getting out of her small town. And when the opportunity presented itself, she fulfilled that dream. As her daughter grew older, Emily had more time for herself. She always looked good and James contributed to that in every way. He did not spare any money on his beloved. When the child became an adult, Emily started going to the gym for dancing and doing yoga. She visited beauty salons and spas more often than any other woman in her circle. The investment paid off handsomely. For her 40 years, Emily looked very attractive. It was this attractiveness that attracted the attention of Callie, Vicky's son. Emily came to visit them from work earlier than her friend and was greeted by a young man. They were drinking tea and suddenly Callie said, "You are very beautiful," a woman confused. It is one thing to hear such a thing from a husband or from men her own age, but another from a young man who knows a lot about youth and beauty. Emily was very pleased. "Thank you," she replied with a smile. "I remember when I was 14 years old, I like you very much. My first conscious love, you might say," the young man suddenly confessed. Goosebumps ran down Emily's back. Callie's confession made her feel uncomfortable. She felt as if she had become an unwitting witness to someone else's secret. She did not speak with him again. And she could not look him in the eye if she saw him again. She was embarrassed to admit even to herself that after that night, she constantly thought about Callie. She literally dreamed of the guy taking her with his strong hands and pressing his lips to hers. She went to see her friend less often. Emily began choosing times when Callie wasn't home. She was glad her friend didn't suspect anything, because she didn't want conflict with her. One day she did run into the young man and he, after getting a moment when her mother had retired to the balcony for a smoke, asked Emily directly if everything was all right. "Are you avoiding me?" said Callie. They were standing so close that it took the woman's breath away. "No, you seem to think I just have a lot of work to do. I can't come to you so often anymore," she answered confusedly. Her lips stretched in an attempt to smile. Callie looked at her sternly with a kind of concern. It was obvious that the guy was nervous. The next moment made everything turn over in Emily's soul. There were butterflies in her stomach and her cheeks lit up with fire. Her friend's son kissed her, and she couldn't push him away. A week later, Callie called Emily and offered to come to him. His mother was out of town, and he was home alone. Upon hearing this suggestion, the woman became angry, yelled at him, and hung up. For a long time she sat there, clutching the phone in her hands and breathing heavily. Did he really think she was going to drop everything and run to his bed? That day Emily got off work early and an hour later was standing in front of Callie, who opened the door for her with a pleased look. Their meetings became a regular occurrence. Emily had a whole spectrum of feelings. She was worried about her relationship with her friend, which would definitely fall apart if she found out about it with Callie. She was ashamed of James, who naively thought she was being held up at work, when in fact she was basking in the strong arms of a young man, and she was searingly and passionately in love with her lover. Often they didn't get to see each other, and Emily tried to keep their dates in the afternoon on her lunch hour, so that James didn't suspect a thing. His wife tried her best to act as if nothing was going on. James, on the other hand, began to see that his wife was starting to look even better. Her eyes glittered and her manners changed. He admired Emily without knowing what these changes were connected with. Once lying in bed after another intimacy, Callie told his beloved, "Divorce your husband. Let's go somewhere together. I want to be with you." He was admiring Emily, and she saw it. "Well, yes, and your mother will kill us." The woman laughed, "And we won't tell her." After dialogues like that, Emily always wanted to break up with Callie, never to see him again or remember what happened between them. She and James had been together for almost 20 years, and she couldn't imagine life without her husband. Despite her feelings for her husband's lover, Emily loved him too and couldn't give him up. But their secret union could not exist happily ever after. Once again, when Emily ran away from work to fall into the arms of her lover, Vika caught them in bed. From what she saw, the woman felt ill, and her son had to hurriedly call his mother an ambulance. Shocked, Vika kept repeating the same thing. "How could you do this?" She looked at her friend with sad eyes, while Emily cried and begged for forgiveness. Callie sat silently in the kitchen, trying not to show his face to the women. He heard his mother say that Emily had to tell James everything, or she would. And the mistress cried and begged her not to. The cheater had to confess. She did not want James to hear about it from a third party, and pulling together the strength, told him everything. He at first didn't believe it, thinking his wife was playing a practical joke on him, but when he saw the tears in her eyes, he understood everything. They decided to save their marriage, they are family, they have a daughter. But after a difficult year full of scandals and resentments, they divorced. Emily's soul missed her beloved, and James could not even bring himself to go to the same bed with his wife. The daughter accepted their divorce. But the relationship between her mother and her peer was not. The woman was left hoping that, after a while, the girl would change her mind and resume communication with her mother. Callie transferred to a university in another city, and she and Emily moved away from their acquaintances and angry tongues. In the shadow of forbidden passions and hidden desires, fate gently wove her formidable net, drawing her into the arms of a dark conspiracy. The wife, surrounded by glittering illusions of her perfect marriage, suddenly plunged into a dangerous game of fate and began to cheat on her husband. But what happens when the curtain rises and the illusions dissipate, leaving her alone, broken and betrayed? In the following stunning tale of betrayal and experience, she will find the strength to rise up, pick up the pieces of her shattered life, and be reborn in all her greatness. Life in the quiet little village is always monotonous. There are no bright impressions, everything seems to go on as if on a rolling basis. The villagers got used to each other a long time ago and have been pairing off since school. There is not much of a choice. They get married, have children, spend their old age, and then marry their children again, and everything goes in a circle. There is no news either, unless someone arranges it for himself. And the main event in my remote village was the sensational news that they will build a new factory. There was a lot of gossip talk. Few people believed in construction, but one summer evening trucks with building materials rumbled past. Machinery rumbled and a construction crew came. It was that day that changed my life forever. We were used to living in the middle of nowhere, in silence and complete peace. My wife, with her emotional and hot-tempered nature, had reconciled herself to the fact that no bright impressions were forthcoming. I did everything a husband should do, earn money, and help in the household. In the village I am a reliable, strong, and hard-working man. She, like a cheerful dragonfly, was not very fond of work. But dreaming was hers. Dreamed of a city, of impressions, travel, and that I was ideal. Even at the beginning of our married life, Annie tried to diversify our life. She was having fun. But I was tired at work and could not reciprocate the mutual merriment. I was afraid to go into the city, in order not to get involved in some interesting story, and also in order to save the family budget. So our family evenings were peaceful and quiet. However, on a quiet summer evening was the beginning of construction, where I saw him. It was the construction foreman who won her heart. I worked from morning till night, was tired, and didn't notice how my spouse was distancing herself. Without realizing it herself, I started going out into the yard more often to do garden work. But that was just the reason. The construction crew, whose foreman was Nikita, was clearly visible from behind a low fence. In the daytime, I would put on a cheeky sundress and go out to the yard to sunbathe and look at Nikita. He couldn't help but notice it. The girl's passion could no longer sit inside. She needed to attract his attention. So she put on short shorts. A top made a mischievous ponytail on her head, took a hose, and began to water the flowers. The effect was not long in coming. Nikita immediately walked over to the fence and a conversation ensued. "Does the construction noise bother you?" "No, not at all." My wife became embarrassed. "I do not pay attention to him." Very sweet, and even coquettishly smiled and made it clear that she was interested in him. It was from that day that something broke in my wife. Deep sighs of regret burst from her chest. I did not understand what was wrong with her. When I asked her questions, she would answer that everything was fine. When I came home from work, I would automatically receive a kiss on the cheek and go to dinner. She understood that she was attracted to Nikita, and she could not overcome this desire. A few days later, Nikita asked I to show her where the stores were. She offered to go with him by car. But of course, she was very afraid of the trip. She understood that it was only a pretext, because she saw in Nikita's eyes the same fire of passion that had ignited in herself. But I went. When she first drove outside the village, the foreman turned off the car, pulling into the shade of the trees. And there she was, already feeling his hot breath on her neck. And so shy, I became bold and passionate, falling into Nikita's arms. And so the 2 summer months passed. When I left for work, my wife would meet Nikita's gaze. And later, they would drive together to the woods, where they would give themselves over to love. She couldn't think about anything else. And I began to notice her coldness and aloofness. Already lying in the arms of this foreman, I wondered what to do about it now. How to tell me the truth? Nikita promised to take her to town. He described in every color how they would live together and get married. The summer flew by. Construction was coming to an end, and E&I was making plans to move to the city. She wanted to go somewhere where emotion and fun beckoned to her. And with Nikita by her side, it would be unspeakable happiness. The construction was finished, and it was time for the young slave to return to the city. E&I was waiting for a chance to confess to me, but Nikita stopped her. Sweetheart, I can't take you with me right away. I have some things to take care of, but I'll come and get you. But how can I be here without you? We'll keep in touch, and I'll be back very soon, and we'll leave together. And he left, and E&I stopped sleeping at night. She didn't want to eat anything, didn't want to see anyone, and I saw that and felt that I simply disgusted her. A week went by, but Nikita still didn't call. And then I began to notice that my wife was throwing up in the morning. And soon I saw a test in a garbage bag with 2 lines on it. I did not want to believe it, but E&I constantly cried and did not eat anything. Immediately, I decided to find out once and for all. And my wife confessed, told me in all the colors of his adultery, and even began to point out my shortcomings. I was furious and slapped in the face. It became clear that the child is not mine, but still did not want to believe in betrayal. But I was possessed by rage. I grabbed my wife and threw her out into the courtyard, threw a few things into her suitcase, followed her, and closed the door. The grief-stricken girl walked down the street, and the fellow villagers looked after her. Many guessed about the young lady's violent shenanigans, but no one offered to help. Waiting for the bus, E&I went into town. She did not know Nikita's address, but she knew the name of a construction firm. She arrived in the city late at night and had to spend the night at the train station. In the morning, E&I went in search of her beloved. She found the firm fairly quickly. Nikita was there. He was surprised to see her, took her outside and led her away from the building. He was very angry. Why did you come here? I came to see you. You promised that we would. E&I, I'm married. I have a family and a life of my own. With you, I was only having fun. But we're having a baby. I don't want it. Get an abortion, or tell your husband it's his baby. He kicked me out. He knows everything. I don't want to know anything. Bye. If you interfere in my family or seek a meeting, I'll go to the police. Nikita left, and E&I sat down on the bench and sobbed. She still had no idea what to do. She didn't know anyone in town, and no one wanted her, and in the village life had come to a standstill. Money was enough for a communal room. The next day, the girl went in search of a job. She found a job at a hairdresser's as a cleaner. She worked during the day, but at night, she wept on her pillow and thought of her bitter fate. Anything always wanted to get out into the city, but not under these circumstances, and not at this price. I received a letter from my ex-wife in which she told me everything, apologized, and asked me not to file for divorce. But my decision was unchanged. After the divorce, she never contacted me again. And how is her life now? I do not know. Yes, and no. The cops told me to sit down, that they needed a statement. I couldn't focus on anything but the clock. Tick, tick, tick. Every second felt like an hour with her gone. We understand this is difficult, sir, some lady officer said. But we need to know exactly what happened. What happened, that's the thing. What the hell did happen? 1 minute everything was normal. Well, okay, normalish. We'd had our fights lately, that's for sure. But it started out so perfect. Remember when we bought our house? God, she was so excited she practically skipped from room to room. We can paint this one blue. She laughed, her eyes practically sparkling. That smile of hers. That's the thing that got me in the first place. Stress at work, bad mood, didn't matter. That smile could melt all of it away. Then we tried for a baby. That wasn't so easy. Doctors, appointments, waiting. Month after month, those damn negative tests. I could see the life drain out of her a little each time. Finally, it happened, and man, her smile then, it could have outshone the sun. But after, things got complicated. She'd get mad over nothing, snap at me if dinner wasn't perfect or I tracked a bit of dirt in from the garage. I tried to brush it off, thinking hormones or stress or something. But then the yelling started. Sometimes over nothing, sometimes I deserved it, I guess. Yesterday, she came up with this plan. I swear, the look in her eye, it didn't feel right. But I always tried to keep her happy, you know? We need money, she'd said, her voice hard. More money. I told her I couldn't just conjure up extra cash. She didn't like that. She told me to wait, that she had it figured out. Then she just left, didn't say where. I paced the house, feeling jumpy, a bad feeling in my gut that wouldn't go away. I texted her a few times, no answer. The news came on, that's when I knew something was way wrong. They were talking about a robbery, same area, about the same time she went out. When the cops showed up, well, that's when everything spiraled out of control. Now here I am, stuck in this room, and they're asking if I knew about it. I want to say no, of course not, but, the truth is, part of me wonders if that crazy look in her eyes, that tension, what if she really was capable of this? My whole body was buzzing, like I downed 5 coffees instead of just one. The cops just kept asking questions. They seemed fixated on whether I knew about, well, whatever it was she'd done. I just wanted to go home, check if she was back, if everything would somehow go back to normal. Didn't they get that this wasn't me? This wasn't us. Look, I'm not the type to brag about stuff, but damn it, I tried. Those long nights where the baby wouldn't stop screaming and I was up at the crack of dawn for work? That was me, pulling extra shifts so we could afford that fancy daycare. Me again, my old buddies asking me out for a beer? Nah, couldn't do it. Had to be a good husband, a good dad. Had to put them first. And it was worth it, for a while. Seeing her face light up when I brought home that expensive easel for her paintings, or watching the kids go wild on the swing set I built. That was enough. That was the payoff. Remember that kitchen remodel? The one where she picked out all those fancy tiles and that stupid farmhouse sink? Hell yeah, I worked my ass off on that, even after my back ached and my hands were blistered. Worth it to hear her humming happily while she cooked up one of her fancy dinners. I might not get the whole art thing, but I got that making her happy made me happy. Then it changed. That spark. It started flickering. The smiles got fewer, the complaints got louder. Suddenly, everything I did was wrong. Like that one Saturday, I finally tried to squeeze in a round of golf. Just one lousy morning, and when I got back. Man, she laid into me like I'd never seen. Screaming that I never cared, that I was selfish. Okay. Maybe I snapped back, maybe we both said things we didn't mean. But hell, the next thing you know, she's coming up with this scheme of hers, saying it's our only way out. I finally got home after another day at the station. God, those people seemed extra unreasonable today. All I wanted was a hot meal, the kids tucked in bed, maybe half an hour of brainless TV before crashing. Just a normal night. But the dinner I'd left warming was still sitting on the counter, barely touched, and the kids were playing way past bedtime. I could hear her laughter coming from upstairs, she was on the phone, probably with one of her artsy friends. It wasn't even a special occasion, just another random night when I came home to a cold house and ignored food. That's when it started, that ache in my chest. I'd always been the kind of guy who brushed things off, who kept his head down and plowed through. But lately, it felt like something was off. Like the kitchen remodel, those fancy tiles she never even complimented, or that birthday present I'd spent way too much on, only to see it tucked away in a drawer a week later. Then there was our anniversary. That stung the most. I'd planned this surprise dinner reservation at that snobby place she always hinted about. But she came home late, some excuse about a client meeting running long, smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. She'd barely even apologized, just shrugged it off and asked what was for dinner. My buddy Dave pulled me aside last week, during our fishing trip. Hey man, I don't want to but I saw your wife the other day. At lunch, with some guy, he looked uncomfortable, like he expected me to go off the deep end. I just laughed, told him it was probably a client or something and changed the subject. But afterward, I couldn't shake the image. Her, laughing across a table from a dude I've never seen. Those late nights at work started happening more often, all with lame excuses. unexpected project, or client dinner, stuff like that. Then those business trips popped up, quick overnighters to cities I couldn't place on a map. The doubt in the back of my mind grew bigger each day. I wanted to ask her straight out, but something held me back. Like I didn't want to face whatever the answer might be. The phone, man, that damn phone was glued to her hand. Texting at dinner, texting during the kids' bedtime stories, even texting in the freaking bathroom. I didn't like it, but when I mentioned it, she just rolled her eyes. It's work stuff, you know how demanding my clients can be. Whatever. Then came this Ashley person. Supposedly a new hire at her firm, some single mom struggling to make ends meet. My wife, bless her heart, felt the need to be her personal savior. I'm just mentoring her a bit, helping her out with the workload, she'd say. All well and good, except the helping out turned into late-night texts and weekend phone calls. Once, I even overheard her whispering on the porch, voice all soft and sympathetic. When I finally got the nerve to confront her about it, that's when things got weird. You're being ridiculous, she hissed. Trying to control me, just like always. It was like a switch had flipped. She made me feel bad for even questioning her, like I should be grateful she took time away from her charity work to grace me with her presence. I couldn't sleep right anymore. The worry gnawed at me like rats in the walls. Found myself snapping at the kids for stupid stuff that usually didn't even get a rise out of me. That model airplane I'd been building with my son sat in the garage, half finished, the pieces scattered like my sanity. Everything was unraveling. The other morning, I saw her texting in the car, driving the kids to school. That's what set me off. I yelled, right there in front of the kids. I'd never done that, never lost my cool like that. Her face got all hard, that icy glare she only used when she wanted me to feel small. The kids started crying in the back seat, and I knew, right then and there, that something was seriously wrong. Seriously wrong. I couldn't take it anymore. The phone calls, the late nights, the lies piling up like a stack of dirty laundry. This wasn't us, this wasn't how things were supposed to be. So, I did something I never thought I would. Found one of those shady ads in the back of some free newspaper, you know the kind, discreet investigations, results guaranteed. Sounded desperate, but I figured, hell, I already was desperate. The guy the first met with was this sleazy type, office in some rundown part of town. He looked me up and down, probably sizing up how much he could squeeze out of me. Didn't matter, I just needed answers. I showed him a picture of my wife, told him I wanted her followed. Gave him what little I could scrape together, and waited. The photos came a week later, thick manila envelope shoved under my door when I got home from work. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely open the damn thing. There she was, clear as day, getting into a car in some supermarket parking lot. Not her car, and the guy driving. Well, I'd be damned if it wasn't Matt. My best friend Matt. I went home, I wanted to throw up, to scream, to smash something. But I just stood there in the kitchen, the pictures spread out on the counter, like I was some character in a bad movie. When she walked in that night, humming that same stupid tune she always did when she was feeling good, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I slammed the photos down in front of her. I don't even remember what I yelled, something about lies and betrayal and Matt. Her face did that thing, the way it twists when she's cornered. First, the denial, then the anger. How dare you? And, you're spying on me, like I was the bad guy here. But I wouldn't back down this time. Finally, it all came spilling out. Ashley, Matt, the affair that had been going on for months, maybe longer. My whole world started spinning. It took everything I had not to collapse right there on our perfectly tiled kitchen floor. Turns out, their families were tight too. Soccer games, barbecues. All of it while they snuck around behind our backs. I felt sick to my stomach, everything, all those years, all those talks about friendship and trust, just a big, fat punchline. The kids, I didn't know how to tell them, how to explain that their perfect world, the one I worked so hard to build, had exploded into a million shards. My little girl kept asking where mommy was, why she wasn't singing her bedtime song anymore. My boy, usually so full of energy, just got this quiet, sad look on his face. Every night they'd sneak into my room, and we'd all pile into my bed, clinging to each other like we were on a life raft in a storm. Then there were Matt and Ashley. Seeing their faces around town was like reopening a fresh wound. I'd always thought of Ashley as family. Our kids played together for years. Now, I couldn't even look at her without seeing them together, hearing her whispers on the phone, picturing their lies. And Matt, I didn't know if I wanted to punch him or just break down sobbing in front of him. I was completely lost, never been a talker, not about big feelings. So I did something I never thought I'd do. Called my brother. We haven't been close for years, always drifted apart for one stupid reason or another. But he answered my call and his voice sounded different. Older, I guess. Less cocky. It all came spilling out. The affair, the photos, the kids. I must have sounded half crazed. But he just listened. For the first time in ages, I felt like someone was actually on my side. He told me to bring the kids and come stay at his place. A small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was enough. My in-laws, now that was a whole other mess. I guess I should have expected it, but they turned on me. Took their precious daughter's side, even after the proof, even with the kids crying and hurting. Her dad even threatened me. Said I'd never see my kids again if I took this any further. My world was collapsing, and the people who were supposed to protect her, defended her. Like the betrayal wasn't bad enough. It was my brother who finally talked some sense into me. Get yourself a lawyer, he said, and not some wishy-washy one. Get yourself a shark. I'd never been the confrontational type, always tried to make peace, keep things smooth. But sitting in my brother's cramped apartment, my kids sleeping on the worn-out sofa, something inside me snapped. We found this lawyer, a real sharp-dressed woman with eyes like steel. She didn't flinch when I told her the whole story, just took notes, that brow of hers furrowed. Then came the bombshell. Turns out a lawyer helps with more than just the divorce stuff. They can dig. Every bank statement, every old credit card bill, it was all laid out under those harsh fluorescent lights in her office. The numbers didn't lie, designer clothes, fancy hotels in cities I'd never heard of. All while I was counting pennies to make sure the kids had new shoes for school. Her so-called art career was an excuse, a cover for this double life she'd built. Then came the whispers, started like background noise you try to ignore, then got louder, impossible to escape. People, friends I thought I could count on, suddenly acting different. Some offered awkward condolences, others avoided me altogether. The worst were the parents at the kids' school, used to be all friendly chats at pickup. Now, those smiles seemed strained, a mix of pity and, I knew there was something off, behind their eyes. Every day felt like a battle. In court, with the lawyers arguing over every plate or picture frame, like our lives were just items on a list. In town, feeling the judgment of strangers. At home. Well, my brother's place wasn't a home, not really. Just a way station, a temporary shelter. But something shifted during those meetings with the lawyer, seeing the proof of it all in black and white. I wasn't just the sad, betrayed husband anymore. I was angry, damn angry, and that anger, it was fuel. I'd always been the nice guy, but enough was enough. It was time to fight back for what was rightfully mine, for the kids' sake, for my own sanity. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, figuring it was some telemarketer or another lawyer looking for a scrap of this mess. But something made me hesitate. I swiped to answer. Hello? I said, voice hoarse from exhaustion. As this, is your name, husband's name? A woman's voice, timid and familiar, but I couldn't place it. Yeah, who's this? That's when it hit me. Ashley? I said, the name tasting like bitter acid in my mouth. Turns out, life likes a sick joke. After everything, she was the one who reached out. Said she saw my address listed in the court filings, wanted to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Figured a bit more pain at this point wouldn't kill me. We met at a dingy little coffee shop on the edge of town. She looked different, not the glamorous, put-together Ashley I remembered. This version was pale, eyes red-rimmed, a slump in her shoulders that mirrored my own. Turns out, Matt wasn't the prize she expected either. We talked, awkwardly at first, then the words poured out like we were both desperate to make sense of it all. The lies, the years of deception. She told me things about my wife, things about Matt, that made me want to be sick. And then she apologized, not for what she'd done, but for being part of hurting me, of hurting the kids. Even in mess of her own making, there was a flicker of decency in her. The kids, they're the hardest part. My little boy keeps drawing pictures of our family, the four of us together and smiling. My daughter keeps asking for mommy to read her favorite story, the one about the princess. I'd choke out some excuse, make up promises I can't keep, and hope they're still young enough to believe me. How do you explain the unexplainable to innocent eyes? Last night, after the kids finally slept, I did something I swore I'd never do. I went into the garage and pulled a bottle out from the back of the tool cupboard. I never was a big drinker, a beer after mowing the lawn kind of guy, but lately, I just wanted to feel numb. I sat there on the floor, staring at the framed wedding photo propped up against a half-built workbench. All those promises, that beaming smile, such a damn lie. The rage bubbled up inside me, hot and uncontrollable. I let out a scream, a primal sound I didn't know I was capable of, and hurled the picture against the wall. The shattering glass was like ice water to the face. I collapsed on the floor right there, and I cried. Cried like I haven't since I was a little kid, sobbed until I had nothing left, until all that remained was a cold emptiness. Somewhere, in the back of my mind, was the thought I should clean it up, that the kids shouldn't see. But all I felt in that moment was bone-deep exhaustion and a question, was I ever good enough anyway? Character assassination, that's what my lawyer called it. Each week in court, it was a new lie. I was abusive, neglectful, mentally unstable. The kind of accusations that make a good man doubt himself for just a second. Then I'd look at my kids, their faces pale and drawn, and the rage would blaze white hot in me again. She'd turned them into pawns in this vicious game. Coached them, I think. Their once bright eyes that used to light up when they saw me were now weary, filled with questions I couldn't answer, accusations I couldn't fathom. Every visit had a new sting, a new accusation, tearing me apart piece by piece. Funny thing happened though. My sister, who'd always been quiet, barely a voice in our family, changed right before my eyes. She wouldn't stand for it. Started dropping by every morning to help with the kids, her no-nonsense voice cutting through the chaos. Eat your breakfast, she'd tell them, not asking, but not mean either. At night, she'd put on her glasses and go to war with my lawyer, scouring the paperwork with a look that could make a grown man squirm. The trial, it was hell. Having to recount the worst moments of my life for a room full of strangers. Seeing her sitting there, not even looking ashamed, and that loser mad shifting in his seat like a cornered rat. The dirt the lawyers dug up, the proof that her fancy trips were all paid for by my sweat and sacrifice. Every word was like a punch to the gut, but somewhere in the back of my mind, it solidified something. I wasn't gonna go under without a fight, not for my kids, not for myself. We didn't get everything we wanted. Judge seemed to think splitting things down the middle was fair. Money from the house sale would be tied up forever, and worse, she'd still get visitation. But damn it, I got primary custody. Restrictions put on Nat and her spending spree? The judge didn't take kindly to that, not at all. Leaving the courthouse, I didn't feel victorious, but something close to it. The kids were little less wary, my sister actually hugged me, and the sky above didn't seem so oppressive anymore. Now it's just us. Our perfect house is full of half-finished projects and more dust bunnies than you'd believe. But washing a load of dishes, it's different somehow. It's my mess to clean. My kids to feed. This bottle's not over. Far from it. But there's a flicker inside me, a stubborn refusal to lose. This is a post that I never thought I'd write, and I'm sure many people say the same. But I also never thought I'd make such a foolish mistake. I'm really scared of how people will react to what I'm about to say. I've been married since February 2016 to an amazing man. He's helped me cope with the pain from a soul assault and emotional abuse. My husband and I, both in our late 20s, deal with depression. Our marriage isn't perfect and we've faced some tough times, especially because of our mental health struggles. I've taken him for granted and I realize now that I needed to work on our marriage and myself long before what happened in the past month. The person I had an affair with was a school friend, someone I've known since I was 11 years old. He was a year ahead of me in school and we were part of the same group of friends. We never dated, and after I changed schools after high school, we lost touch. About a year or so later, he reappeared in my life, which seemed to be a recurring pattern. We chatted and sometimes went for drives, but then he went off to university and disappeared again. We remained friends on social media throughout all this time. Then, during my third year of university, I was diagnosed with anxiety and prescribed medication. I ended up reaching out to him because I always felt like I was to blame for his occasional disappearances. During my third year, he became the person I would call in the early hours of the morning when I was struggling. We got close and he offered to come and visit me, which I eagerly accepted because I was single and he claimed to be as well. He came to stay with me, and we ended up sharing the same bed. He saw me undressed and also engaged in acts of soul nature, except I was incredibly uncomfortable, and apart from kissing I kept saying no, but I was young and very stupid back then, and he got me with the very emotional story of his ex-girlfriend going through pregnancy removal. We never had sex as I stood my ground, and then the next day he left telling me he was going away on a work trip for 7 weeks and wouldn't be able to contact me, and naive me bought it. He took around 3 months to get back in contact and I lost it, flipped out via text and told him to never contact me again. I was a 22-year-old university student at the time, and looking back, I can admit that I was incredibly naive. I had very little self-respect and I didn't have many expectations for myself or others. Since then, I've grown and matured a lot, but back then, naive is the best way to describe me. Perhaps I was unconsciously willing to overlook certain things, but I genuinely had no idea that this guy had a girlfriend at the time. In fact, he explicitly told me that he was single. I should add that this was in 2014. I moved on and met my husband, and everything was going well. I had no contact with the guy from my past and started realizing the negative experiences he had put me through. Then, I decided to tell my husband about this guy and others I had been involved with. My husband, understanding my struggles with depression, asked me to block these guys and ensure they couldn't contact me. Over the years, we've been working on resolving my issues related to relationships and intimacy. I'm even on the waiting list for intensive counseling to focus on these areas. All seemed to be going fine until the end of September, when my grandmother passed away. For some reason, I posted about it on Twitter and my affair partner reached out to me through private messages, expressing his condolences since he had lost his grandmother the previous year. Instead of being sensible and discussing this with my husband right away, I responded and things quickly spiraled out of control. We exchanged messages in which he told me I was the most amazing person he had ever met, how beautiful I was, and that he had always loved me. I made another significant mistake by apologizing for pushing him away, even though I hadn't, and expressing regret for not being better. I don't remember the exact words, but I've discussed most of it with my husband when he found out. My next big mistake was sending inappropriate photos to AP. He kept assuring me that he was there for me and that I could talk to him about anything. He seemed so glad that I was back in his life. During this time, things were getting worse with my husband. We were arguing more and I was becoming increasingly protective of my phone. I should mention that, as a way to help me with my mental health, my husband keeps an eye on my daily phone usage. I've had days where I would spend hours on my phone, neglecting my well-being and our marriage. My affair partner and I started meeting up and having physical affair during this period. I knew my husband often checked my phone, so I went out of my way to delete incriminating conversations and photos. About a few months later, my husband came to say goodnight and picked up my phone. He instantly asked, "Who's this?" That's when everything came crashing down and I got caught. I got caught because I was enjoying the attention and was happy to have this person back in my life, so I didn't go to my husband and tell him. I told him that our relationship was just emotional and the text conversation didn't reveal anything physical, so he wasn't aware to what the extent of the physical relationship, and I omitted the detail about having physical affair as I didn't want to hurt him. He told me it would have been much less hurtful if I had come to him at any point, and I truly wish I had. Honestly, I do. Initially, I got defensive and started blaming him, but since then, I have fully accepted all responsibility. I've told him as much as I can remember. However, I did leave out some details, such as the inappropriate photos I sent and how many times we were intimate. I did this to protect him from getting hurt. I want to be clear that I'm not trying to justify or make excuses for my actions. My husband didn't deserve what I did, and I still can't believe I may have jeopardized my marriage. He's really upset and I'm not sure if he's going to leave me. As soon as my husband found out, I took immediate action. I deleted all access to AP, cutting all ties, and removed the social media accounts he used to contact me. My husband called AP right away and AP quickly shifted blame onto me, saying it was all my fault. While I am definitely at fault, AP didn't take responsibility for his part even though his messages showed otherwise. Initially, he made my husband believe it was solely my fault. I understand that my actions have consequences and I have indeed harmed my marriage. I agree that this way of thinking needs to change, but I'm uncertain about how to stop it. I don't want to solely blame him because he didn't force me to respond and he didn't make me send those photos. Those were decisions I made on my own and I deeply regret them. I think I'm just really angry with him. I recently found out that back then when I was 22 and, in the university, he lied about being in a relationship, so I believe he took advantage of me. It was a time when I was completely single and in a very vulnerable state, and I thought he was a friend I could trust. I don't think I'm any different from him now, but this happened 4 years ago, before I even knew my husband, and he told me he was single. Knowing now that was all a lie doesn't surprise me at all. I was naive and it took me years to realize that he had actually manipulated me. I agree that I accepted stuff that people with higher respect and confidence wouldn't accept. Although, part of my soul abuse was a very serious case of having my drink spiked, which is a 17 to 18-year-old I didn't know to look out for, so yes, I am angry at myself, angry that I let myself be used and put into dangerous situations that still hurt me and impact my marriage. As for the second time I slept with him, I was married to my husband. Absolutely, I am the sole party responsible and you're right nowhere, and the vows didn't say that, and it makes me feel sick that I caved at that and that I gave him the opportunity. I should have mentioned earlier that my affair partner has a girlfriend whom he lives with. My affair partner really went to great lengths to hide everything. He blocked my husband on social media and took it a step further by taking his girlfriend's phone to block both my husband and me. The poor girl had absolutely no idea about any of this, and she might still not know if my husband hadn't taken action. My husband contacted my affair partner and told him that he knew who his partner was and that he had until the next day to tell her about it because she deserved to know. My affair partner tried to handle it on his own terms, but my husband essentially forced him to break the news to his partner, which was heartbreaking. She thanked my husband for making my affair partner tell her, and he also admitted that he had stolen her phone. This is when I learned something that has made me even angrier. My affair partner had been in a 6-year relationship with this girl the entire time. Yes, when he came to see me, he wasn't single. I can't believe that this guy messed me around all these years. Is it okay for me to feel angry and upset about this? I'm deeply in love with my husband and I will forever be sorry for what I've done. Right now, it feels like our marriage is on shaky ground because he feels betrayed by my actions. However, we are still living together in the same house and I hold on to hope that we can work through this. I've committed to improving myself and working on my mental health. Every day is a struggle as there are moments when he's loving and affectionate, but then he breaks down. We've thought about trying marriage counseling, but he's unsure if it can help us rebuild the trust he had for me. I feel devastated by what I've done to him and I'm terrified that he might realize he can't move past this. I also feel a strong sense of self-hatred and I constantly blame myself for what I've done. There shouldn't have been a reason for me to be angry at him, but I find myself snapping at him because he's afraid I might revert to my past behavior. The other day, I got upset with him because he mentioned that he believed there was more to the story than I was telling him. I realize that I tend to get snappy and defensive, and it's not just a reaction to being called out. It's something I've struggled with for a long time. Sometimes, yes, I still feel sorry for myself. I am genuinely remorseful and I am deeply sorry for what I did to my husband. I understand that it will take time to earn back his trust, so I've given him my phone and password. He wants me to share information that I've deleted, but there's nothing to recover because it has already been deleted. Pushing for it wouldn't help resolve anything. My husband believes that my emotional outbursts can be a bit childish, but it's mainly because I'm incredibly frustrated with the slow progress we're making. We haven't had a child together, so in a way, if our relationship doesn't work out, at least no child gets hurt. I really dislike being questioned and nobody wants to be seen as the one causing harm. Communication has never been my strong suit, and I acknowledge that my betrayed husband hasn't been very patient with me so far. Often, I find myself formulating a response instead of genuinely listening to what he's trying to convey. I've said many hurtful things to him that I don't even remember saying. I've shouted a lot and refused to stop even when he told me he was triggered by our conversations. I've also wrongly blamed him for the affair, arguing that it could have been worse, and I've even accused him of never caring about me. I've said similar things in the past during my moments of depression, and it always takes time to repair the damage. But now, we're dealing with the added complication of my affair, which has eroded my husband's trust in me. He feels that my words and actions last night and most of today have undone some of the progress I had made in rebuilding our relationship. I'm truly disappointed in myself for letting my anger and frustration get the best of me, especially when my husband was having a tough day. As the one who had the affair, I know it's my responsibility to be the healer, not the one causing conflicts at 3 a.m. If anyone reading this has any advice on how I can work on myself to become a better person and partner, I would greatly appreciate it. I'm fully aware that my husband doesn't deserve this pain, and he's in a very fragile state right now due to my actions. Did anyone else have a difficult time in the first few weeks after D-Day, which was about 2 weeks ago? Update: one evening, there was a knock on our door and a process server handed me divorce papers. This came as a shock because we were considering reconciling. A few hours later, he returned home and I confronted him for not personally giving me the papers. He revealed that he had recovered all the deleted messages from my phone and had seen everything. I tried explaining that I hadn't tried to hide anything. I deleted the messages to protect his mental well-being. He also told me that he didn't need to police me anymore and that he had spoken to his therapist, who allegedly said I was a burden on him. I doubted whether his therapist had really said that, and I thought he was being a coward by not taking responsibility for his actions. He claimed he could no longer trust me, even though that wasn't what he had been saying a few nights ago. I reminded him that we had agreed to work on our marriage, but he denied it and went ahead to file for divorce. He said he had barely slept more than 3 hours a night for the past 2 weeks since he found out about the affair and it was affecting his job. I told him that if he had agreed to marriage counseling, he might not be facing these issues now. I understand that the affair was my fault, but I feel like he didn't make an effort to work on our marriage. I'm really devastated right now because I don't know how I can go on without him. He has supported me with my mental health, sometimes at his own expense, and I truly feel abandoned. I'm hoping he might change his mind about the divorce. In the meantime, I'm looking deep within myself to understand the reasons behind my choices and to work on myself so I won't seek external attention from someone else to validate my self-worth, which ultimately cost me my marriage. It's a challenging and lengthy journey, but it's one I must undertake if I ever hope to